Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06 on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here. It's the Big Super Tuesday. It's an exciting day, Julie Gunlock. Democrats in so many states are gearing up and getting out there to vote for Nikki Haley this morning. In the states that they can. It'll be, somebody needs to do the breakdown on how Nikki Haley performs in states that have open primaries and allow Democrats to vote versus states that, have a quaint notion that only Republicans should choose the Republican nominee.
Right.
And we'll see how that goes. But coming up later in the program at 7:35, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tina Descovich, talk about that 60 Minutes hit job. Then at 8:05, Sean Spicer will bring the spice. And at 8:35, Denise Rooker-Krepp, expert on D.C. crime policy on the bill that's supposed to pass today, the D.C. crime bill. That'll solve everything.
Oh, yeah.
We have a problem in the D.C. and getting the district council to pass a legislation always solves it, said nobody ever.
Right.
I am Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock, and we're joined by Hans von Spakovsky, he of the Heritage Foundation, of course, where he is an expert on all things legal. And, by the way, in charge of the Election Law Reform Initiative at Heritage as a former county election official over there in Fulton County, Georgia. And I want to get to that mess in a bit, Hans. But your reaction when you saw that the decision that came down yesterday was not just in favor of the Constitution and basic democratic norms in our constitutional republic, but also that the decision was 9-0. How important was that?
Oh, it was really, really important. And by the way, can I say I told you so to all those liberal experts who were on MSNBC and elsewhere saying, oh, obviously the president is disqualified.
Just say his name, Hans, David French.
Right.
And George Conway.
Yeah, because, look, remember, we had this conversation when the case first got there. And one of the things I said was, look, state officials, if you look at the text of the 14th Amendment, only Congress can enforce this provision, not state officials. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court said. And what really infuriates the left, and you could see this when you watched CNN and MSNBC yesterday, was that, not only did they lose on the constitutional issues, but they also lost because it was a 9-0 decision, and therefore they couldn't say, "Oh, this was just the partisan conservatives once again." This is brings up the question of the legitimacy. They couldn't do that.
Yeah,
and so they really are at a loss this morning. But the bottom line is this: the three states that had said Trump can't be on the ballot, Illinois, Maine, and Colorado, without this decision by the Supreme Court, almost 14 million registered voters would have been disenfranchised and would not have been able to choose who they want to have as the candidate for president.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on the significance of the unanimous ruling here and John Roberts' role in bringing this court together. I think after Dobbs with the leak, there was a lot of anger towards the court and, frankly, the fact that we still don't know where the leak came from. I think people really have doubted his leadership. But tell me how he did this and what that means for the court and the reputation of John Roberts.
Look, I think he convinced the other members of the court and did a very good job of it that they had to have a united front so that the court would not be accused of what we were just talking about, engaging in a partisan decision. And it's also obvious if you look at the concurrences filed by the three liberals on the court. This decision made a great deal over the fact that if state authorities had the ability to disqualify a candidate or disqualify someone who's actually been elected in their state, but before they've taken office, it would cause electoral chaos. You might have some states saying, oh, yeah, this person can be a candidate. Other states saying, oh, no, he can't be a candidate. And the liberals talked about that in their concurrence. So I think they realized that if they went the wrong way on this, it would be a huge, huge mistake. And so they agreed with the conservatives on the court that you just can't do this under the Constitution.
It sounds like, Hans, you're suggesting, and I sort of speculated about this earlier, that there were obviously there's always disparate decisions when you get 9 people who know what they're talking about. Do you think, and it's impossible to know until after, books will be written, right? But do you think John Roberts sort of said on something like this, we got to figure out the one thing we all agree on, so we can at least have a 9-0 on a certain aspect. You can write your concurrences, you can write other opinions if you want, but we are not leaving this room until we find the one thing that all 9 of us can agree on. Do you think that could have happened?
Yes, I think it did, and I think that's also evidenced by the fact that this was what they call a per curiam decision. That means that normally an opinion is written by one particular justice, and it says that at the beginning of the opinion. Right. When it's per curiam, they don't say who wrote the opinion because it's all of the justices together.
We're all of one mind on this.
All of one mind on it. So I think you actually are exactly right about that.
It brings you chills, honestly, considering what we've been through and how incredibly divisive and volatile this was. Because you talk about the disenfranchisement, and President Trump in his statement said, this is really important because they shouldn't be able to keep someone off the ballot, which is true. But it's not really about keeping someone off the ballot. They shouldn't be allowed to keep Americans from voting for their candidate of choice. That's right. Really, it's not about Donald Trump, it's about the voters.
No, that's exactly right. And I don't think people, look, this case was about Trump being on the ballot, but as the court pointed out, if state authorities were given this power, they could wait until after the election had occurred and then say, well, Donald Trump may have won this state, but because he engaged in insurrection, he's disqualified from holding office. In fact, they could do it just before Inauguration Day. Yeah. And the court said, nothing in the Constitution requires that we endure such chaos. And boy, that's the best line of the whole opinion.
And like I said, I do want to get to some of the other, if you can stay with us for one more second, because there's more to discuss with you. But that chaos, that, again, Ketanji Brown Jackson, for God's sake, Sotomayor, for God's sake, the chaos that they avoided with this 9-0 decision, Hans, was actually encouraged, as you said, by these so-called legal analysts and experts. And that's also part of what's poisoning the conversation in this country, in that there aren't just basic understandings of legal and constitutional norms that we can get behind. And that's, as good as this is, it does expose that very disconcerting deterioration of what used to be a rather circumspect and fact-based discussion in this country having to do with law, justice, and jurisprudence.
Well, it's true, and it's because, unfortunately, the left has a dismissive contempt for the Constitution and the rule of law until and unless they think it gives them an advantage.
Hans, can you stay here? Because, again, Democrats have spent the last 3 years not making the case for their policies or for their candidates. Instead, they've been using the law, using the justice system, using criminal justice to try to keep people from being able to vote for Donald Trump, because clearly they can't beat him on the ideas, it appears. So we've got other legal cases to get to, including one in your old stomping grounds, Fulton County, Georgia. So stay with us, please, Hans.
Happy to do it.
It's 7:15 WMAL.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Upgrade to a new walk-in shower from Long Baths. Call now to get your free estimate today.
Later this morning on the Chris Plante Show, hey, today is Super Tuesday. The Democrats are having another mental meltdown over the Supreme Court. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
And the Fani Willis case down in Georgia, it's not a case against Donald Trump anymore. The entire focus of the legal wranglings down in the Atlanta area has to do with removing Fani Willis and her team of prosecutors who have been corrupted by her illegitimate behavior, it appears. It has now taken another turn as another prosecutor has offered to testify against Fani Willis. In fact, this prosecutor claims another witness's testimony about her relationship was wrong, false, that they're lying under oath. And from your perspective here, Hans, and this is why we like you, because you do have a political agenda in your perspective, but you've been on this program saying, yeah, that case is a loser. That's not going anywhere. This one has a chance. So I know you're not going to bring your own, rooting interest to this. Objectively speaking, you're the judge and you're seeing the evidence about Fani Willis, the relationship with the special prosecutor, Mr. Wade, and again, the bar here is appearance of conflict of interest. Where do you rule on this, Hans?
You immediately remove Fani Willis, Nathan Wade, and Fani Willis's entire office from this prosecution, and you transfer the case to another county where another DA can re-examine the case and decide whether to continue it. And
is it even a close call?
Yeah.
No, it's not, and it's not. Look, the focus has been on the adulterous relationship, and that's important. But there are at least half a dozen serious violations of the professional code of conduct that governs lawyers, and the evidence on several of those is not in dispute. In fact, you didn't even hear any witness testimony on them because the judge ahead of time said, "Well, I don't need any witnesses because we've already got all the evidence on this." I don't see how the judge can do anything other than remove her, particularly because, and people seem to forget this, look, she was already cited once before in this very case for a ethical violation when she had the grand jury target a state senator who at the time was running for lieutenant governor and publicly talked about how she was targeting this guy who was running for lieutenant governor and then appeared at a fundraiser for his Democratic opponent. There's a whole order from the judge citing her for her ethical misconduct and saying, you can no longer target the lieutenant governor with your grand jury investigation.
Okay, but, I think many people wonder, okay, she can be taken off this case, the case can be transferred. It doesn't stop there, right? Is she going... we had Joe DeGeneva on, and he said that it's shocking that nobody has filed any kind of official bar complaint against her. Does that have to happen for her to be disbarred? I assume so, or for any cost to her behavior here?
The Bar Association, I think, has an absolute obligation, given all the evidence in the case, to initiate an investigation of her with the idea of seeing whether she should have her license suspended or terminated. And if they don't, that will be a black cloud on the Bar Association for not policing its lawyers. But look, the state attorney general, a guy named Chris Carr, who I think has ambitions to be governor, he needs to open an investigation of her because it's possible that she violated the state law on not receiving kickbacks from vendors. That's part of the whole issue of her getting these luxury vacations paid for by the guy she was paying with taxpayer money. That's a violation of state law. That's a criminal violation, and the state AG needs to investigate her over it.
So, and if the judge doesn't do what you're suggesting here, it can only be, listen, she's already raised the race card on all of this, that she's being attacked because she's a black woman and they fear it. And this judge is up for election, of course. He could easily, if he has no actual ethics or values, which sadly we got to take that into consideration as a possibility, Hans, he could basically look at all of this and say, listen, this is obvious grounds for appeal. I'll kick the can down there. Let the appeals court handle this because they're not up for election. I am. And why should I stick my neck out on this thing?
Yeah, I sure hope he doesn't do that. By the way, Fani Willis raising the racial issue, that was a violation of the professional code of conduct. That in itself, which nobody questions, so there's video of her doing it, that is a black and white, it's not no gray area.
So to speak.
Black and white violation of the code of conduct. No pun intended.
Yes. All right. So you're expecting that to happen, though, as if this judge has any ounce of integrity. That leaves us with the immunity question, Hans, that the Supreme Court will hear arguments on the last week of April. If you could quickly, is there anything in this Colorado decision that might sort of serve as a template for what we might see in the immunity discussion?
No, I don't think so. I think there'll probably be a real split between the justices. The only thing we know is the Supreme Court has never faced the issue of presidential immunity from criminal prosecution. They have faced the issue of civil immunity from civil cases, and they previously decided that a president is immune from civil liability based on the idea that if he isn't, good grief, he's not going to take any actions that could result in him being civilly sued for damages after he leaves office. I think the very same rationales that caused the court to say that lead to they ought to say that you've got immunity from criminal prosecution too, but I don't know if they'll go that far. They may do that, but then say you have to draw a line between official acts and personal acts, and then the question is, well, where do you draw the line? How do you distinguish what's a personal act and what's an official act?
Yeah, if a president of the United States swears an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from enemies foreign and domestic, and you truly believe that the Electoral College results have been corrupted by nefarious means in a couple of states, you can certainly argue that you believe it was your official act as president to do what you could to halt the process and actually protect the Constitution here. I mean,
yes. No, that's you. Listen, you just encapsulated the whole proper argument on this, Larry. Are you sure you didn't pass the bar?
What a waste. Thanks, Hans. Always great stuff from Heritage Foundation. Hans von Spakovsky. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
7:25.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:36 now on O'Connor and Company. Good morning, Greater Washington area. Your nation's capital is ready for you to seize the day, so get to it. Coming up at 8:05, Sean Spicer will join us. At 8:35, Denise Rucker-Krepp on a new crime bill that's going to face the District Council this morning, because that'll solve all the crime problems in D.C. It's Super Tuesday. We've got full analysis of that and the legal proceedings in the Supreme Court. A good day for Donald Trump. All that coming up. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Good morning, Julie.
What ideology are they being indoctrinated into?
Let's just say children in America cannot read.
They often dodged questions with talking points.
Really? Why don't you show us that, Scott Pelley, instead of just deciding that and then narrating over the fact? This is a classic example of how they do this in the mainstream media, and 60 Minutes is the gold standard of it, of course. Well, let's actually let Tina Descovich do something that Scott Pelley wouldn't let her do, and that is speak her mind without being interrupted and not being characterized as some sort of cartoon character. She's the co-founder of Moms for Liberty, and she joins us now. Tina, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on this morning, Larry. I'm excited to be here and
now,
be able to talk freely.
Yeah, exactly. I want to applaud you for a couple of things. First, going on the show in the first place. I think it's important. I agree with David Marcus here that it's important to go into the lion's den, show that they don't intimidate you, even if they deceptively edit you. I assure you that there are Americans who watch 60 Minutes who watched this and said, oh my gosh, they're right. And you won people over, number one. But number two, you did something incredibly important. You had the transcript, and you put out what you actually said on social media to expose 60 Minutes for what they are. So well done on both counts.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of comments out there that said, why would you go on a program that is left-leaning, that you know what they're going to do to you? And, we're not stupid. We knew exactly what they were going to do to us. They didn't have us on to showcase us or put us in a good light. There was no chance of that happening, but we don't care. We're moms. We're representing 100,000 other moms and dads. In general, people are covering up, hiding, not exposing what's going on in schools. Our public schools are failing right now. We could get into the stats. I'm not sure how much time we have, but we will continue to say it. Anyone that's going to give us airtime, no matter how they're going to treat us, we are going to take the opportunity and say what we have to say.
Well, there was this fascinating moment where he brings up some sort of waiver that you can sign that says your kids can't check out X, Y, and Z books. What I found so fascinating about that scene is many parents don't know these books are in the library. And that is exactly what you and many other parents are doing, trying to expose this. And I think that really came through in the interview, even though you were interrupted and edited. You guys were very good about sort of laying out that these books exist. And you said it just then. You said they hide it. They hide it from parents. Do you think that Scott Pelley wanted to sort of hide that fact? Because it certainly seemed that way with the editing.
How would parents know?
Yeah.
Not only is 60 Minutes hiding it, look at every story across the country. They try to flip the script. Book banning, book banning, book banning. We'll show the books. Tiffany and I both brought these books early on to our spouses and a few people around us, that were like, why are you guys talking about these things? And then you show them, their jaw drops, and they say, oh my gosh, you have to show everyone these books. So we had no idea, to be honest, when we went into the 60 Minutes interview, that it was going to be all about the books. We did an hour pre-interview with the producers. They did not mention the books. It had nothing to do with the books, but we knew also it was a topic. So we came prepared with all the books because, that's where they tend to want to go. And so to Tiffany's credit, when we sat down, I said to Scott Pelley, I was like, well, Scott, tell me exactly what you'd like to get out of this interview. And he said, well, this is about the books.
Yeah.
None of that was in the preview. So
That's
goes, oh,
fascinating.
It really is.
He said, oh, this is about the books. Or Tiffany said, oh, it's about the books, Scott. Let's talk about the books. And she reaches below her chair and she's got a whole bag and she starts stacking the books up one by one. And he said, we don't have time to read all those books. And she said, if you want to talk about the books, we are going to read from these books. Of course, none of that gets shown.
Of course not. But although I got to say, for the keen viewer, there was a tell here. He sort of revealed something that I think is worth noting. Listen.
They're mostly young adult novels with minority, gay, lesbian, or transgender characters. Some depict sex and violence. Most were in high school libraries. 4 were in classroom curricula.
And he goes on to say, most people wouldn't want this in younger children's libraries. So he's conceding the fact that there's not only objectionable material, but clearly there is some age limit as to where these books would be unacceptable. So in a way there, Scott Pelley, without actually engaging with you in a conversation about it, because he was more interested in stereotyping Moms for Liberty and demonizing you and creating a caricature of you, in a way he's saying, yes, there's objectionable material. Yes, there is some age limit. At that point, Tina, it's really just a discussion about A, what that age limit is, and B, more importantly, don't moms and dads have a position to have a say in that age limit?
That is the exact conversation we actually had with Scott Pelley. Of course, they didn't air any of that.
Amazing. Amazing.
They have the right to stand up and speak out about these things. Will they always win the argument? Is every parent always right about where they want the age? No, but these are meant to be community decisions. The American education system is set up in a way that it's controlled by local communities, and it's meant to have everybody's input, parents' input, having discussions about what their children in their community are being taught. And so what we're doing is just capitalizing on that, using that system and getting people engaged and involved in their kids' education. It is beautiful the way it works, and it is the way it's supposed to work. And for them to demonize us and parents across the country, it's unacceptable.
Tina, he sort of had this us against them attitude, right? Librarians and teachers against you guys. And you guys are very clear that you have good relationships with teachers. You appreciate teachers. How have you been able to reach out to the ALA, or do you have teachers coming out and speaking out on this? Because I think that would be powerful, breaking that narrative that it's parents against teachers. I think a lot of teachers and librarians would agree with you that there need to be age limits on these books.
You are correct. We have many of our members are teachers. We have chapter leaders that are teachers that are very vocal, speak in their state houses against, gender ideology and some of this legislation. And so they don't get a lot of media coverage because that, disrupts the narrative of parents against teachers. Many of our members are teachers and former teachers that have left because they have been put in compromising situations, I'll say, having to, mandated by their school districts that they have to use the pronoun that the child wants and deceive the parents. And there's a number of teachers out there that have just quit over things like that.
Tina Descovich, great job. Moms for Liberty co-founder, Moms for Liberty. Keep doing what you're doing. And again, thank you for, I know how hard it is. And I know that you didn't intend for this to be your second career or maybe even third career, but you're doing it well. And you're over the target. And again, I want you to emphasize Scott Pelley. You got Scott Pelley to concede, even though he meant it as some kind of snark and attack. But he even conceded in that deceptively edited report that there's stuff in this book that kids shouldn't see. Now the question is, who gets to decide that? Yeah. Is it Scott Pelley's judgment, or maybe local moms and dads in their community should be able to decide that?
Tina, you and Tiffany are just great.
Well
Thank you
done.
so much.
Thanks, Larry. Hey, Larry, I'm going to take that talking point today and add that into some of my other interviews because that is a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. And thank you both so much for the time.
See, this is why you did it, because you got people thinking. You got people thinking. Thanks.
It's exactly why we did it. It's 100% why we did it. And we knew we would be, treated badly, but it was important to get this conversation out. So it worked.
7:45. Hey, remember when Mark Cuban pretended to be just the everyman? He's just a tech nerd who ended up making billions and then bought his basketball team. And here's how he says he's going to vote this year. He's going to vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. But, of course, he had to take it one step further. If they were having Joe Biden's last wake and it was him versus Trump and he's been given his last rites, I would still vote for Joe Biden, which, makes him a typical Democrat because they tend to vote for dead people. Oh, no, wait. They have dead people vote for their candidate.
Yes, that's right.
I got confused there. Because it's really just a protest vote.
He's literally having a weekend at Bernie's. He's just they're going to prop up Biden and he doesn't care.
By the way, he recently cast his ballot in the Texas Republican primary. Like, wait a minute. Hold on, Mark. You're going to vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump, even if Joe Biden is literally on his deathbed. That's how much you hate Donald Trump. So why? Clearly you're a Democrat. Why would you vote in the Republican primary? And like most Democrats, he did it so he could vote for Nikki Haley. People say, why are you guys so hard on Nikki Haley? We're not hard on Nikki Haley. We're just saying that most of the support you see, which is not a lot, is not actually coming from Republicans.
It just shows what a cult it is, frankly, that they are in a cult, that they have no ability to look at the situation and make assessments based on what's going on. It's so obvious he is feeble. He is gone. And I'm talking about Biden here. And yet Cuban is loyal.
But you are right to call it a cult, but I just want to be clear here because it's not a Biden cult. And it's not a Democrat cult. It's not an Obama cult. It's not, usually cults, say, what do you believe? And they'll tell you what they affirm, right? This is a anti-Trump cult. It doesn't matter who's propped up there.
I don't agree with that, though, Larry, because, again, I remember how cruel they were to Mitt Romney.
Today Trump happens to be the guy right now.
But that's why I'm saying it doesn't matter that it's Trump.
It's an anti-Republican
It
cult.
100% is. I mean, they called Romney obsessed over the binders and the women and called him a racist.
He was a racist, sexist.
It's just astonishing. And people forget that. I mean, I was called incredibly vile names because I had a small Romney thing in my sign in my yard. I will never forget that treatment. People called me racist. They screamed at my kids. People were unhinged, and they forget that because they think it's TDS. It's Trump derangement syndrome. It's not. It's Republican.
You're right. It's fair. I use Trump because he happens to be the guy right now. But you're right. But that said, because Trump is not like Romney and it doesn't pretend to be the nice guy,
I get it.
And pretend that he does bring out the worst in them.
Okay, it was just so bad.
But you're right. It was.
They would
bad.
do this to Nikki Haley. It doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
You have an R by your name.
Look at John McCain.
They have been dehumanizing Republicans and calling us Nazis. It's okay to punch a Nazi for years.
When John McCain spent most of his adult political career being a thorn in the side of George W. Bush, they loved him. The second he was the nominee and stood in the way of Barack Obama,
he was a racist.
He was senile, he was insane, he was too old, he was mentally incapacitated, he was all of it. And then suddenly he became their friend again because he was a thorn in the side of Donald Trump.
There you go.